Hi, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the EverSmart City channel. EverSmart City, where technology enhances the human experience. On today's episode, we will be talking about tokenomics and how it relates to EverSmart City. Before we start on that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sophia Olivas. I am the CEO and co-founder of EverSmart City. We also have another partner that is not with us at this time because it is crunch time for us. We are right in the middle of launch week for our NFT, and he is back with the Keebler Elves baking our NFT.
And I'm Mark Anthony, co-founder of Smart City. I am responsible for all the real estate development and factory manufacturing of our homes of the project. Thanks for joining us again today, guys. If it's the first time joining, make sure to check out our other videos, get a feel of who we are and what we're about. And like Sophia said today, we're going to get into our tokenomics and how we're going to affect the world.
Yeah, so let's first start talking about the SDGs. If you don't know what the SDGs is, in 2015, the United Nations came up with 17 sustainable development goals known as the SDGs. The one we're going to talk to you about today is poverty and how tokenomics is a plausible solution for poverty. So we want to talk about how globally the number of people living in extreme poverty have declined from 36% in 1990 to 10% in 2015. However, even though we were on a downtrend, due to COVID, new research just came out that tells us that the economic fallout from the pandemic is going to be increasing global poverty by as much as 500 million people, or 8% of the total human population. So this would be the first time since 1990 that poverty will have increased globally. So let's talk about what is poverty. There's 5 types of poverty. One of them being absolute poverty. There's relative poverty, situational poverty, generational poverty, rural and urban poverty. So let's kind of break them down so you kind of understand what it is and how we've got some solutions in tokenomics. So absolute poverty is also known as extreme poverty. It involves the scarcity of the basic needs: food, clean water, health, shelter, education, information. So those who belong to absolute poverty tend to struggle and live and experience a lot of childhood deaths that are preventable from diseases like malaria, cholera, water contamination related diseases. It's usually common in developed nations. We'll say in developed countries. It's uncommon, in developed countries. And the first introduction of this, you'll remember hearing about it in 1990, was people living on $1 a day. So that's how the poverty line was measured, and that's how absolute standards was measured. In October 2015, the World Bank reset it to $1.90, so 1.90 a day. So each nation has a different threshold for the absolute poverty line. So then let's talk about relative poverty. So the difference between absolute and relative poverty is that it's defined from a social perspective. So it's that your living standard compared to the economic standard of the population in your surrounding. So for instance, you could be considered poor if you can't afford vacations, buy presents for children at Christmas, or send your children to university. Again, relative poverty, it's all relative. It's depending on where you're living and the neighborhood that you're living in. So if you've ever heard of people saying, I'm the poorest one in my neighborhood, that's what they're speaking about. There's also situational poverty, and that's the temporary poverty, like when someone loses their job, environmental disasters, pandemics, things like that. So people can help themselves even with small assistance. And that's when social nets come in handy, is during situational poverty. Generational poverty is something that can be whew, it can be pretty widespread. It's handed over from an individual and families from one generation to the next. So you'll see it when people talk about living in the projects, like they came from the projects. The reason why that plays such an important role is that one that comes from that type of situation, and especially multiple generations, can find it that much more challenging to get out of generational poverty. So generational poverty is considered when it occurs in families where at least two generations have been born into poverty. Then there's rural poverty, which is areas of population of 50,000 or below, where there's less job opportunities, less access to services, less support for disabilities, and less, or I should say, less quality education opportunities. And then urban poverty. This is where it happens in the opposite of populations of 50,000 or more. And this is some of the major challenges that are faced by the urban poor are similar to rural. They have limited access to health and education, inadequate housing and services. This is where affordable housing really comes into play. And there's violent and unhealthy environment due to overcrowding, and there's little to no social protection mechanism. So in talking about poverty and in talking about the SDG goals, which is the core guidance for EverSmart City, we are guided by all 17 of the goals. We follow 16 of them religiously, and one of them on the ocean. We are not quite there yet, but eventually we will be moving into the ocean as we grow our cities. And Mark's going to talk to you about how we relate that and how tokenomics can provide a solution for poverty.
So one of our main goals with our project, Sophia mentioned, was generational poverty. And one of our goals is to create generational wealth, or enable people to themselves to begin to create generational wealth. So one of the different things that we're trying to do is implement blockchain and tokenomics into this conversation, and how we can integrate those technologies with some of our true technologies and practices through human, and just integrating them and adapting some of today's latest and greatest technologies and combining them together. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is having what's called an asset-backed resource, asset-backed token, where instead of just having a token that's backed by user adoption in terms of almost like not necessarily a popularity contest, but a lot of what we see in the market is what can be trending. We're trying to create an asset that is backed by the natural resources that our communities produce, being stored energy, natural gas, carbon fiber, hydrogen, and the overabundance of those natural resources can be sold or used in ways to create consistent revenue pools that support the tokenomics other than just user adoption in terms of buying and holding, trading, or using for commerce, or between peer to peer, right? Using these to support the tokenomics can create what's called a circular economy. So us, as our EverSmart City founding team, we've been organizing a really big, pretty much master blueprint, along with Arizona State University's sustainability department. They have a project in there called Greenlight Solutions, where we've been optimizing different ways to also give resident incentivizations in forms of NFTs that can represent either the purchase of a home, where they can stake and earn staking rewards, as well as other future capabilities, staking capabilities in the future, as a way for people that are not only living in the community and owning a business there to turn their home into an asset, but also be able to have the opportunity or ability to create generational wealth through holding these NFTs in these businesses over course of time. So really closing that gap in terms of the generational poverty to creating an environment where people can start to have a better position to start to build generational wealth. So really just rewiring these different connections that we have in human history, and integrating some of these new technologies that are out there in the marketplace today. Like I mentioned, this future staking platform that we'll be letting out will be a way for people to earn mining rewards, which is very almost unique because it creates a utility more than just people using the coin. It allows the outside public to now participate in this project outside of just living in the community or shopping there. It gives a reason for almost anybody to participate in terms of supporting not just these small businesses, but this new conversation that we're bringing into, I guess, economics by using tokenization, using sustainability practices through renewable energy, and using sustainable resources, and creating environments that are not just affordable in terms of the cost of purchase, but affordable in terms of the cost of living to be able to sustain a certain lifestyle, to be able to position themselves, like I said, again, to create generational wealth. A lot of times it's hard for people to think long term, in terms of building family legacy, generation to generation, thinking about our grandchildren's grandchildren when we don't even have kids yet. It's hard to think that when we're living paycheck to paycheck. So by kind of enabling these resources and opportunities to kind of free people up of those different worries, to help them enable, give them more free space in their mind to be able to start thinking of these new ways of living in terms of building generational wealth without the just stress or worry of just the day-to-day paycheck to paycheck lifestyle, to pretty much empower them for the future.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with all of our public out there. We want to let you guys know that our Founders Key NFT drops on March 11th. There is the link down below, so you can join us for that. And we look forward to the next episode and catching you there.